We're going to call to order the sixth and final meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Local Government for the 2023 interim session. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Senator Chambers Armstrong, Senator Elkins,
Present.
Senator Harper Angel, Senator Mays Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Senator Nemus,
Present.
Senator Storm, Senator Thayer,
Here.
Senator Wheeler, Senator Williams, Representative Bentley, Representative Bowling, Representative Bray, Representative Brown, Representative Chester Burton, Representative Dixon, Representative Doan,
Present.
Representative Frazier Gordon, Representative Freeland, Representative Imes,
Here.
Representative Justice, Representative Lockett,
Here.
Representative Meredith, Representative Proctor,
Present.
Representative Raymer, Representative Reed,
Here.
Representative Stalker,
Present.
Representative Stevenson, Representative Thomas,
Present.
Senator Mills, Representative Bridges.
Here. Having a quorum present, we are now constituted to do business. We're going to look for approval of the minutes from the October 24th meeting. They're online or in your packet if you have requested one. Do I have a motion? We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. This time I'm going to ask our first speakers to approach the table and prepare for their presentation. And while they do that, I want to see if anyone has any guests they'd like to introduce. Apparently not. So will you introduce yourselves and proceed?
Let's try that. Chairman Bridges and members of the committee, thank you all for allowing us to be here. This rite of passage every year where we come in and present our legislative agenda. We're thankful for the opportunity to do that. I'm J.D. Cheney. I'm Executive Director, CEO of the Kentucky League of Cities. We bring our officers every year, and this year it's Mayor Mike Hughes of City of Auburn and Mayor Rita Dotson from the city of Benton. Mike serves as their president, and Rita Dotson is their first vice president. So our membership elects a president and vice president each year, and this gives them an opportunity to come in and talk about our legislative agenda. It certainly is an honor to work for these individuals and our executive board as well. We engage in a pretty extensive process at the League of Cities. For those of you that are new to the committee, our board of directors is composed of about 64 individuals. That different regions of the state, different sizes of cities, different forms of government for cities, and in addition, we have all the associations that are part of the KLC board. So the Municipal Attorneys Association, the City Managers Association, the City Clerks Association, the HR directors, they all filter their agendas through KLC, so we present a singular legislative agenda. They never disappoint us because they feels like we get a few bills passed each session and they come back and reload us in the next session. Some of these issues you're going to hear are probably smaller in nature, even though there's no such thing as a simple bill. But some of them are smaller that create some efficiencies for the taxpayers or for the administration of city government that the associations bring to the board or various members. We invite all of our membership to tell us what kind of policy issues, whether they're regulatory or legislative, that they want us to pursue through our advocacy process. 68 members. I was wrong. 68 members of the KLC Board of Directors doing that. Kentucky cities, I think most of y'all understand the impact of our cities. We contain about 60% of the population. Each decennial census, it shows that our cities continue to grow. We had a study a couple of years ago from the Pegasus Institute, which outlined about 75% of economic activity, economic transactions occur inside of cities. And we pack a mighty punch for a little bit of land area. We like to ask how much, have people guess, how much of Kentucky's land mass lies in incorporated cities. It's only 3.66% of Kentucky's land mass that's incorporated that represents Kentucky cities. 80% of jobs are there. 40% of our city governments operate utilities, water, wastewater, gas, electric, and 45% of them operate a municipal sewer system. So many of the infrastructure provisions that are made throughout the state occur in our cities. And I'll tell you, we really do appreciate the relationship we have with the state legislature as partners in helping Kentucky progress. Our working relationship with you all has been one that has been tremendous over the years as we try to make our hometowns better, but the state better overall. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Mayor Hughes to talk about the legislative agenda that was adopted by our board of directors and our priorities during the next legislative session. So this gives you all an opportunity to kind of hear about some of the bills. We're going to go through them quickly. So if you do hear about them in January or February, once you're meeting in session, at least you'll have some familiarity. And then we'll come back and be happy to answer any questions you all have at the conclusion of the presentation. But with that, Mayor Hughes, take over driving.
Thank you. Thank you, J.D. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, for allowing us the opportunity to present to you today. We appreciate that. KLC's Board of Directors met in June and established our legislative agenda. This year, revenue diversification would have probably been first. However, annexation took that spot. So annexation is our highest priority by our board's vote. Cities must ensure they can grow and develop. On average, 77 annexations were filed annually between 2016 and 2022. During that period, a vast majority, 92%, were consensual. Kentucky cities must protect the statutory right to grow and further economic development in the entire state. We must protect property owners' rights for the ability to have city services and protect those taxpayers as well. Revenue diversification was our next highest priority. It's the returning issue, is the need to modernize city revenue options. Cities are revenue limited, must have the ability to generate the funds needed to pay for the services that people expect in Kentucky and continue to grow and prosper. A 131-year-old section of the Kentucky Constitution impedes the legislature's ability to reform local government tax policies comprehensively. Section 181 of the Constitution limits cities raising necessary revenue primarily through a few options. Property tax is about 25.3% of city tax revenue in Kentucky. Occupational taxes, 58.2% of city tax revenue. Cities are forced to heavily rely upon revenue generated from productivity. Transportation funding was our next highest priority. The quality and availability of city roads play a key role in a community's livability and the quality of life. They are also essential for economic development. Currently, motor fuel taxes are the only portion of the road fund shared with local governments. In both fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021, cities spent more than an average of $335 million annually to maintain and build streets. Cities spent approximately 50% more on streets in fiscal year 2021 than in fiscal year 2010. Cities maintain more than 10,500 miles of heavily traveled public streets. Local tax dollars represent 4/5 of what cities spend to maintain streets. A system established in 1948. That's 10 years before I was born. It is past time to modernize. We encourage the legislature to include cities in the discussion about electric vehicle fees. As of December 2022, Kentucky has more than 7,500 registered electric vehicles, an 81% increase from the prior year, most likely to increase more exponentially. Substance abuse. Substance abuse continues to be a costly and tragic issue plaguing every Kentucky city. Over 2,130 Kentuckians died from a drug overdose in 2022. This figure is a 5% decline from the previous year. However, despite the annual decline, many of Kentucky's communities still experience the increase in overdose death, shifting around overall a little less, right? As a result, Kentucky must continue an active position to support legislation that addresses the criminal aspects of drug trafficking and substance abuse that have led to the state's drug epidemic, while also focusing on treatment, rehabilitation, training, and workforce reentry. KLC initiated House Bill 248 in the 2023 session, which provides a needed step toward ensuring recovery residences in communities across Kentucky offer the care needed to help Kentucky battle addiction by setting minimum standards for recovery homes. Well, thank you for that. Our next priority would be CERS administration. I've been told not to use that acronym anymore. I have to use each letter. Brianna didn't like me using it, so. As you know, House Bill 484, sponsored by Representative Russell Weber during the 2020 session, freed CERS by establishing a CERS board for the County Employee Retirement System and a KRS board for the Kentucky Employee Retirement System and State Police System. The bill also created the Kentucky Public Pensions Authority to provide administrative support for the systems with an oversight board of members from both systems. We thank you for your continued support of this independent administration of the County Employees Retirement System. That ensures that our local pension system operates efficiently and in the best interest of its employers and members. It is one of our top priorities to maintain this individualized focus of the independent CERS board, which has allowed for higher investment returns compared to KRS and continues upward. Since we freed CERS, there has been an estimated savings of $1.2 million per year. We will also continue to monitor the expenses and operations of the Kentucky Pensions Authority, Public Pensions Authority, which is the administrative support arm system of CERS, and CERS bears over 62% of the administrative expenses. Alcohol regulatory license fee equity. Cities continue to be limited in their ability to collect much needed revenue so that they can continue to provide governmental services at their current spending levels. As a result, Kentucky must explore every avenue for all cities to expand their authority to collect revenues. The 2019 legislative session permitted cities under 20,000 in population to impose a fee up to a maximum of 5% and grandfathered in those cities who have a population greater than 20 per thousand or had a rate greater than 5% previously implemented. Kentucky must provide equity for all cities to impose a regulatory license fee upon the gross receipts of alcoholic beverage sales, instead of just cities below 20,000 population. This will ensure taxpayers do not incur any unfunded financial burdens, such as additional policing and regulatory costs. KLC also advocates for legislation that will permit the imposition of the same local licenses at the state level to harmonize local and state license fees. Property tax notification. The current procedure for collecting Kentucky property taxes does not allow many Kentucky cities to have adequate time to ensure the accuracy of ownership records in their municipalities for the delivery of tax bills. This can result in revenue collection delays, potentially inaccurate tax assessments, and frustration from local taxpayers with their city government. As a result, Kentucky must require property valuation administrators to send cities and owners updated ownership information as of January the 1st. Utility franchise agreements. Current Kentucky law requires that utilities must maintain a franchise agreement with the local government they serve, but no penalty is outlined within the law if the agreement is not honored. This leaves our municipalities powerless if private corporations decide not to honor all elements of the franchise agreement. Additionally, KRS 96.010 requires all parties to be notified on the sale of a new franchise 18 months before any existing utility franchise expires. As a result, Kentucky must create safeguards for local government and penalties for private companies that violate their agreement with Kentucky cities, and reduce the current 18-month notification period for the sale of the new franchise to 6 months or less. Paramedic and EMT training. The health and safety of its citizens is the primary responsibility of a local government. One such service is having a highly trained team of paramedics. Paramedic training has shifted to an academic setting rather than one that is vocational, making obtaining certification more difficult. This has resulted in delays in the training process and the inability of contracted private companies to keep up with the needs of our communities, which is putting the lives of our citizens at risk. A statewide assessment of the current educational practices must be performed to determine if it can keep up with both current and future demand for paramedics. We will continue to work with KBEMS to modernize its approach to how it certifies paramedics and emergency medical technicians to make it easier to find qualified candidates. Notice to cities of environmental violations. The Kentucky Energy Environment Cabinet must be required to notify cities when it issues a notice of violation to a private entity operating within the municipality's boundaries. Many times, these violations go unnoticed and unannounced, and the public deserves to be informed. We will work with the Cabinet to develop a notification process to ensure transparency for our communities. We'll turn it over to Mayor Dotson at this time to finish our presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Bridges, as well as the rest of the committee, for allowing us to speak today. We're very thankful to be able to be here today. The impact of remote work on local occupational license tax receipts. As a result of technological advances in today's modern workforce, the next generation of the labor force has experienced a shift in their ability to be mobile with their professional careers. This shift was magnified with the conclusion of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw remote or telework become more of the norm. Many Kentucky cities have experienced a shift in the withholding practices in their jurisdictions. Kentucky must explore all available avenues to modernize their collection of occupational tax receipts to rectify the shift to remote work and its impact on city revenues. Planning and zoning training. We also support an amendment seeking to reduce the training requirements for members and staff serving on planning commissions and boards of adjustments. Outlined in KRS 147A 027 Current law requires members to have 4 hours of orientation training within 1 year of their appointment or within 120 days following the appointment. The requirement for orientation training for staff is 8 hours. In addition, there is continuing education requirements of 8 hours for members and 16 hours for staff every 2 years following the initial appointment or hiring. This far exceeds any training requirements for other commissions and boards and takes away valuable time from work and family, which can result in a decline in service on these boards. Transient room taxes from well-based platforms. Another issue for consideration is the collection of transient room taxes from web-based platforms. With the support of Kentucky Travel Industry Association, the Kentucky's Tourism Commission's legislation was passed that made it clear that online travel rental companies are required to collect and remit transient room taxes to local governments. However, despite compliance from most online rental companies, at least one company has refused to comply with the law and has called to centralize the collection of local transient room taxes. KLC opposes the centralization of local transient room tax revenue collections and supports forced compliance of web-based platforms such as Airbnb with state law. Aquatic Health Code. Regulatory changes to the Aquatic Health Code resulted in the unnecessary closure of several pools this year. KLC is working with legislators to restore the language that would ensure our communities can enjoy pool season while in a safe environment. Neighborhood homeowners associations, or HOAs, can often improve the quality of life for many in a city by providing additional amenities and providing a safe, beautiful, vibrant sense of community for the city's residents. However, in many instances outside their control, these associations cannot continue to provide the services they were originally created to provide, which leads to a communal concern about additional funding. As a result, legislation is needed to help cities address when homeowners associations go defunct or plan unit documents do not adequately cover the maintenance of communal areas. My representative, Chris Freeland, carried this legislation last year to address this concern. I look forward to working with him again on this issue in the upcoming season. Voluntary training. We're seeking an appropriate amendment to the statute regarding voluntary training for elected officials such as mayors, council members, and commissioners to give cities additional flexibility in incentivizing more participation. Another issue for cities is keeping our cities safe and accessible in emergencies. To do that, we need to have accurate information on what roads are accessible. As such, we are asking the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet to notify our municipalities of road work within their city limits. In addition to the cabinet, utility companies would need to provide the municipalities of any roadblocks, works, or closures within the city. Both changes will help the city plan its work and communicate with their citizens about interruptions to city traffic. Municipal utilities. Our board also heard from municipal utilities that are seeking an amendment to KRS 96.750. Increasing the amount a municipal utility or board member can be paid from $2,400 to $4,800 annually, and another amendment to KRS 96.780, increasing the amount to $40,000 from $20,000 of a contract executed by a utility supervisor. Both statutes apply to utilities operating under the Little Tennessee Valley Authority Act. Other utilities do not have these statutory requirements. Modernization of public requirements. Currently, only a select few of Kentucky cities can post documents and other legal announcements for public notice on their website instead of paying to print the entire statement in a local newspaper. This antiquated method of communication is resulting in additional costs to Kentucky cities with limited revenue and is not an effective method of communication in today's technologically advanced world. Once notices are published online, they will remain more accessible because it can remain in one location without any additional cost to taxpayers for a longer period of time. The state's antiquated publication requirement costs city taxpayers around $1.4 million each year. In 2020, House Bill 195 was passed to provide some relief. However, it did not go far enough because it only applied to local governments within a county that has a population of 80,000 or greater. Kentucky must go further and continue to modernize its publication laws to permit cities of all sizes to only publish advertisements and to publish full documents on their website to save taxpayers money and increase accessibility to vital information. Disaster response funds. We are seeking to provide accountability for emergency management programs by requiring city executive authorities to sign emergency operation plans and participate in quarterly reviews of programs that receive state funds. We also need more local control by amending state statutes to allow cities to directly request state supplementary and federal funds instead of going through their county. Tax increment financing, or TIF. Finally, House Bill 360 during the 2023 session only provided a one-year fix for the impacted TIF district agreements that were created before the income taxes were lowered, so estimated revenue that was promised by the state can be collected. KLC is continuing to work with legislators on a permanent solution that would cover the lifetime of the agreement. Thank you, and this concludes our presentation on KLC's 2024 legislative agenda. We will be happy to answer any questions that we can.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Do we have any questions?
Very good presentation.
We have a quiet bunch this morning. We appreciate you coming out, and we'll be looking at these over the upcoming session. So with that, that'll conclude yours, and we'll move on to the next presenters. We do appreciate
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm low tech, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to
We'll
figure
get someone down there.
I think I'm good. I'm just trying to get out of there. Does that look like us there?
Okay, if you don't mind, introduce yourselves, and you may begin.
Will you help me, Brenda? Will you just help me start? Good morning. Jim Henderson, the Executive Director at KCO. We'll introduce ourselves.
Dan Mosley, First Vice President of KCO and Harlan County Judge Executive.
David Livingston, President-elect of KCO and Scott County Magistrate.
Okay, good morning. I think I got it ready to go here, so thank you. Thank you all so much for giving KCO the chance to be here this morning to talk a little bit about our priority areas going into the next session. You've heard who's here this morning, so you can see us on the screen there as well. Quickly, just want to let you know, kind of like the league talked about the process they use, we have a process as well that really kind of builds our platform for our priority focus as we go into session. A little different. We really do have a very grassroots approach to gathering feedback from our members throughout the year. We go out throughout the state during the time just after the session and over the summer and have listening sessions with our county officials in the 15 area development district regions. We also have surveys, webinars, different kinds of online and virtual sessions with members. We plug into a lot of our affiliate conferences and just kind of general overall interaction with members throughout the year. Really kind of just ultimately builds from the ground up the kind of issues that county officials are talking about. We ultimately bring those before our board, usually in the early fall, to kind of give us more guidance and narrow that a little bit as we move into the session. And then ultimately, of course, our team of folks like Shelley Hampton, Gracie Kelly, myself, our lobbyists are ultimately tasked with executing that guidance. And so it's really kind of evolving even throughout the year, obviously, as things happen. This is a very fluid environment. An underlying theme that is something we've been focused on the last few years is something that we call telling the county story. And that just simply means trying to do our best to educate and inform more about what counties do. The county government structure is very complex, and sometimes it isn't clear how all the parts fit together. Each elected county official has a specific responsibility or responsibilities, and they have certain autonomy and self-governance when it comes to fulfilling their roles. Most all county officials ultimately depend upon the framework of the county budget, which is created by the judge and fiscal court. So even though each office is independent, the intergovernmental relationship is vitally important, and it requires necessary cooperation to best serve the citizens of our county. The individual elected county officials also have their own respective affiliate associations, in addition to those county officials being members of KCO. Some of those executive directors are here today, and they're really our partners as we work together throughout the year to try to create a united county voice in the Capitol. At KCO, we tend to defer to those affiliates for the work on specific legislative issues that are uniquely a priority for those specific members. For example, Jerry Wagner does a great job on specific sheriff issues. We tend to kind of be there to support him and others like Jerry when they're working on an issue and move their agenda forward and help when needed. But KCO's advocacy focus is a little broader. We tackle more big picture county issues and often issues that affect the entire county government or multiple county officials. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our KCO President-elect, Scott County Magistrate in your fourth term.
Yes.
All right, very good. David Livingston. So, David?
Thank you. As Jim mentioned, I want to express my personal thanks to each of you and the work you do as elected officials. It's a special privilege each of us has been given when the voters place their confidence and choose us to exercise their most precious right, asking us to serve as their elected representatives. As state legislators, you hear from many people that testify at this table here in Frankfort. The same is true for Judge Mosley when he is back home in Harlan County, for me in Scott County, and 1,500 other elected county officials. You know what? I am missing page 1. I just realized that.
Oh, you did good. You're good.
No. So anyway, okay, we're talking about annexation here. The individuals who each of you answer to are the very same constituency we answer to. So we deeply value the relationship, common bond elected county officials have with the members of the General Assembly. Counties are uniquely the local government that serve as the political subdivision of the state. We're constitutionally created entities with massive statutory roles and responsibilities to carry out as an arm of the state. Most of the responsibilities we perform at the county level are the basic needs of our citizens expect from government. There's not always a lot of glitz or glamour about the way our dedicated county clerks record and maintain all vital public records like deeds, liens, and mortgages, or how our sheriff's deputies serve warrants and civil summonses, often walking into situations where most of us would never want to encounter, or how our county emergency managers and firefighters prepare and train for disasters we all hope and pray never happen, or the work of our county coroners, our overworked county attorneys serving not only as the county prosecutor, but as the counsel to our county fiscal courts. And did I mention jails? Our jailers and deputy jailers deal with overcrowding and a wildfire of drug abuse every day. Judge Mosley will talk a little more about jails in his testimony. Bottom line is, the list of county services is very long, and we're proud to do this work. If we peel back the layers of county government and our roles, I think you understand we at the county level are providing the critical roles citizens expect and deserve from their local government. In addition to countless constitutional and statutory mandates we carry out, elected county leaders are also keenly focused on what must be done to create the climate and opportunities for economic prosperity, quality of life, and a culture of community that fosters an environment where people want to live, raise their families, and ultimately build their future. Oftentimes, it is the county elected leaders who are out front working to recruit and retain job creators, because we understand that to complete the circle of public service that we provide, we must have vibrant, growing counties where everyone has the opportunity to contribute and benefit from our collective county access. Counties serve in ways most of the public may never even realize. As county officials continue to discuss with you our important interrelated issues, it has become our focus at CAECO to continue telling the county story, helping people better understand what counties do. So once again, thank you. As your local government partner, thank you. Counties are grateful for the way you've recognized that we're in this together, and we must be for our common constituencies. Last year, in this nearly exact moment, we were here testifying about much of the same as we often do at this point in the legislative calendar. But unlike your priorities, we broached a difficult subject that had been brewing for a while when, at the direction of the CAECO board, we included in our testimony the request that the General Assembly, at minimum, begin the conversation about how city annexation negatively impacts counties in certain circumstances. We briefly talked about decades-old laws that had created natural tension and unfair conditions in some of our counties. Honestly, we didn't know what to expect as the result of that testimony, but we were hopeful that we could at least begin the conversation, and so the conversation has started now. Before you recognized there was a legitimate issue that needed addressing, the legislature took action, creating the framework for meaningful discussion, and that discussion has been ongoing. Over the past several months, the Annexation Task Force has met and helped create the much-needed dialogue for this topic. Thank you for taking the tough vote and setting this discussion in motion. Counties are hopeful, particularly because of the interim discussions. In the early summer, we initiated a conversation with our city friends. We asked them to sit down with us to see if we could figure this issue out together as instructed by the task force members. We've had some very good, productive discussions. Elected county and city leaders are mostly guided by a shared desire for public service and a genuine interest to work together to grow and serve our communities. We found this to be similarly true when the elected county and city officials from CAECO and KLC met in early fall. The mayors we met with absolutely understand our concerns and agree with us that the current annexation laws create an unnecessary tension between our two governments. We each pledged that we should work together to find a solution, and that's the charge we've been given to our CAECO team. We're committed to crafting a solution that is mutually beneficial to city and county governments. It must ensure county revenues are held harmless when annexation occurs, but more importantly, we believe the opportunity should exist for the city and county to share in the future revenues derived from economic growth, especially where the city and county have contributed to that success. We both think this is fair. CAECO looks forward to continuing our conversations with our city friends, and folks from both of our organizations are actually meeting again this afternoon, so stay tuned on that and we'll bring more information to you. Continuing the discussion about the important partnership counties have with the state, you would expect a major priority for us at CAECO to be the state budget. As political subdivisions of the state, we carry out so many state services that require direct appropriations of state funds. We want to thank A&R Chairman McDaniel and Chairman Petrie for their leadership all year long crafting the budget and their willingness to recognize the strong partnership that naturally exists between the state and all counties. We greatly appreciate the continued progress that's been made for county funding in the current biennial budget. The investments you've made in our county governments have been critical for our collective success in delivering basic government services. Counties pledge to do our part of the work in this strong partnership and hope the state will continue to invest in the important services that counties provide to all Kentuckians. It should be no surprise to anyone in this room that transportation funding also continues to be a major priority for counties. With counties maintaining half of all the road miles in Kentucky and 1/3 of all the bridges being county-owned, I think you can see why this is such a high priority for us. I pulled some. I'll go off script for a second. I pulled some statistics. There's 80,000 mile roads in the Commonwealth, and counties maintain about 40,000 of those. There's 14,000 bridges, and 9,500 of those are state bridges. The rest are mainly counties. So you can see where we're picking up the share of the majority of those outside of the state. Transportation funding is critical to ensure safe, efficient access within and between counties. Kentucky's current funding model isn't keeping up pace with growing needs, especially at the local level. As you may know, our county road and bridge funding is mostly derived from the motor fuels tax at the wholesale level. But if shifting patterns continue in the automobile industry, we can no longer rely on that revenue stream as our only source. In fiscal year 2022 alone, county spent more than $90 million out of our general funds on roads. In 2015, the cost for a single road mile in my home county of Scott was $70,000. In 2015, a mile of road was $70,000. Today, it is more than $100,000 per mile. Scott County currently has 290 miles, and this number continues to grow as new development comes into play. Judge Mosley shared with me that in his first year in office in 2015, he was paying $83 per ton for asphalt. That price is now $153 per ton, nearly double, and he has 241 county-maintained road miles in Harlan County. Over the past 10 years, even as Kentucky's overall road fund has increased, the motor fuels tax revenue stream has lost more than $800 million in buying power due to inflation using the National Highway Construction Cost Index. Out of all the different funding streams that make up the state road fund, our only road fund share comes from the motor fuels tax. Solutions to improving the funding model will take all stakeholders, and we look forward to continue working with the General Assembly and our partners to address roadway funding for our state. That includes electric vehicles, which you've already begun to address with charging stations and an annual fee, as Kentucky is poised to become the electric vehicle production capital of the world. As EV use grows, a funding model allocating a portion of the electrical vehicle fee and charging station tax directly to counties is critical. We support distributing Kentucky's electric vehicle fee and charging station tax through the current road funding formula to ensure that counties receive a portion of these funds. Thank you again for hearing our concerns, and thank you from our shared constituents for serving in your roles in state government. Judge Mosley.
It's great to be with you here this morning. Like David, I want to begin my comments with a sincere thank you. From my perspective, as KCO First Vice President, it's truly incredible to see how the General Assembly has prioritized some of the most consequential issues facing counties. This is greatly appreciated by county officials statewide. David talked about the annexation issue and the major work that's gone on during the interim session on that topic, but the other big conversation we've been engaged in during the interim, and it is truly another generational discussion, deals with jails and corrections and how all of that could look in the future. I wholeheartedly agree with Kentucky Jailers Association President, Campbell County Jailer Jim Daly, who serves on our KCO board. He has repeatedly said we don't have a jail problem in Kentucky. We have a community problem, a drug problem, a mental health problem that has complicated the criminal justice system and caused it not to work very well. These problems put immense pressure on county jails and leave county leaders trying to fix a systemic mess that they have little control over. And whether we like it or not, we are in this thing together. Regardless of the who, the how, or why in corrections, county leaders must be part of the solution. Much of what happens in this arena impacts our communities and the people we serve. This broken system is a problem we all must own and work to make better. My county jailer, B.J. Burkhart, worked in the detention center setting for many, many years prior to becoming jailer in 2015. I'm thankful for someone like him who operates our jail in the best possible way, focusing on ways to reduce recidivism, ensure a safe environment for staff and inmates, all while watching every penny spent to try to avoid bankrupting the county. Unfortunately, as the judge executive and fiscal court, we're mostly faced with the financial drain this broken system puts on county budgets. Jail costs are a $330 million county budget expenditure each year. $330 million each year. And that doesn't include Fayette and Jefferson counties. In many counties, the jail isn't just the place where police or the sheriff can take someone who's arrested. It becomes the long-term housing, mental health, and workforce training facility for state inmates. All Class D felons in Kentucky are housed in county jails. If we're supposed to be running long-term incarceration facilities, then we definitely need to be involved in all that's needed to help put these individuals on a path to rehabilitation rather than warehousing them and seeing them cycle back through the system time and time again. This comes at a high price, a price we struggled to keep up with in Kentucky. Again, we greatly appreciate the efforts that have been made to increase jail funding, and we deeply appreciate the partnership we have with you, which enables us to expand inmate programming. Counties have invested more than $125 million statewide out of our general fund revenues to subsidize the necessary care needed for this population. Of 19,000 state inmates, almost half are housed in our county jails. The Task Force on Jail and Corrections, chaired by Representative Bray and Senator Schickel, has given stakeholders in this multifaceted system a platform to share perspectives and suggest improvements. We appreciate the focus that has been placed on this issue and await any recommendations from the task force. I think they're slated to meet again on Wednesday. One of the biggest cost drivers to county jails is the fallout from the opioid epidemic across this state. At times through my career, I've asked the jail staff to identify for me how many of our inmates are in jail because of the drug problem, either directly or indirectly. Each time I've asked this question, the answer has never been under 90%. I have no sympathy for drug traffickers. They need to be in jail. People who are addicted, however, need treatment for this disease. This drug problem is most definitely the challenge of our time. Being from Eastern Kentucky, I've seen the opioid epidemic front and center in my county since I was in high school. Now that opioid epidemic has been complicated by a crisis with fentanyl coming from China through the southern border and is killing people in this state daily. From the financial perspective of our jail, last fiscal year we had to transfer nearly $800,000 from our general fund to cover jail operations. That figure doesn't include over $350,000 a year for a bond payment on the facility that was built more than 15 years ago. Losing more than $1 million a year is painful to a county budget. And although it hurts, it is much worse in many other counties than it is mine. Here's another reason why the opioid settlement funds are so important. In Harlan County, we've invested our first settlement dollars into hiring a Casey's Law advocate case manager. As many of you know, a Casey's Law advocate is someone who helps families navigate the court system for their addicted family member and get them the help they need by allowing loved ones to intervene on the substance use disorder of a person addicted regardless of age and without criminal charges. This position is also focusing on evaluating our jail population and working with prosecutors, public defenders, and the court system to identify those in the jail population that may be a better fit for treatment programs outside of the jail setting. And I'm thankful for Mandy Gooden, the person that is doing this work in my county, who is a person in long-term recovery who has been right there with the people she's helping. I firmly believe this type of investment will result in more folks getting the help they need, restoring hope in their lives, a pathway to succeed moving forward, which inevitably will make the person a contributing member to society rather than a burden to taxpayers. One final note of significance as I wrap up my portion of the testimony: a piece of legislation that was passed late in the 2023 session, almost overlooked at the time. House Bill 9, sponsored by Representative Richard Heath, and by the way, thank you for this. It established the Government Resources Accelerating Needed Transformation or grant program. It will enable specific communities in Kentucky, priority communities, as defined in a presidential executive order issued in 2021, to access federal funding for projects in the public interest by providing matching funds that are required for federal grants, but are often out of reach for many of our counties. The General Assembly appropriated $2 million in FY 2024 to start the program. Public agencies like fiscal courts and nonprofit entities in 41 counties were initially eligible, with more added to the list by the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Energy Communities, or IWG, which serves to identify economic revitalization resources for coal, oil, and gas, and power plant communities and their workers. The grant program is administered by the Department for Local Government, with area development districts assisting in coordinating and helping counties, cities, and nonprofits apply for the grant funding. This legislation has tremendous potential to assist counties in tapping into hundreds of millions of federal dollars in grants for various needs. We hope to see more allocation of funds into the grant funding pool in 2024 so counties can invest in transformational economic development. Thanks for giving us the time to share the county story, and now I'll turn it back over to Jim, who will wrap us up.
Thanks, Judge. The final priority area we want to touch on relates to tax reform at the county level. For at least the 25 years or so that I've been involved in county government, there's been discussion about amending the Constitution to allow for some type of county sales tax authority. I've testified on this issue many times, and I've told this story. I remember one of the first conversations I had with Judge Buchanan, the Warren County judge, when I was elected in 1998, was about this very topic. And so we've been talking about it a long time. 38 other states allow for sales tax at the local level. And most of our members would prefer to have this option at the county level. Not only would it give greater flexibility for counties, it would allow county governments to have a broader tax base, spreading the cost among a larger number of our people. Today at the local level, we primarily tax property owners, businesses, and wage earners. To be able to do anything different at the local level would require an amendment to the Constitution. Now, we're very realistic about this. It's a heavy lift. The voters are very cautious about amending the Constitution for any reason, and likely would be very cautious about an amendment that involves taxation. But KACO is committed to this effort. In this last iteration, we've worked closely with Representative Meredith and our counterparts at the Kentucky League of Cities. We worked for the better part of 2 years helping advance the conversation even before legislation was crafted. If Kentucky's counties and cities are ever to seriously be able to consider reducing our reliance on the existing taxes we have, then we would have to consider a constitutional amendment to broaden our ability to tax differently. One final thought on a little lighter note. I mentioned our conference as a place where we gather a lot of information earlier. Next week is actually our annual conference, our annual KACO conference. It's in Lexington at the Central Bank Center. It's the one meeting each year where over 1,000 people gather. It's kind of the conference for counties. And so I'd like to invite each of you all. I know Shelley sent out a personal invitation to each legislator to be there, but if you're able to come by, I think you would enjoy the opportunity to network with county officials at our conference. So with that, I think we've covered our presentation, and we'll turn it back over to you, Chairman Bridges.
Thank you. Have we got any questions?
Page 1.
Representative Fraser Gordon has a question.
Thank you. Thank you to both groups for being here. It's very informative, and it kind of gives us a glimpse for sure of things that are on the road ahead. I have a question actually about coroners. Have you heard from your coroners? They're just terribly overworked in this crisis that both groups mentioned as far as and my coroner reached out to me and he says, Deanna, how do I, I'm housing all these bodies. He goes, how does not even one person come forward to say, I love you, I miss you, this is my, friend, family member.
Right.
And so, as I understand it, they are one of the elected officials, but apparently they're treated a little bit differently and as far as their obligations and budgets and that type of thing. So I just wanted to know if you could speak on that a little bit and if you've heard from your coroners.
Yes. The county coroner is one of the elected county officials that I mentioned that has a very difficult job. It's certainly not one that many people seek out, that job or that elected office. And it's another one of those necessary services that among many that I think counties struggle to figure out how to adequately fund. I know that it's a different situation in most every county. I don't know if David or Dan have a specific reference to their county and how they work, but it's very different depending on the county.
Yeah, and it is included, of course, in our county budget, and our coroners have been obviously, as you referenced, impacted by the overdose death rates that we've seen. Another issue there is the indigent folks that are not claimed by someone. They may have family out there. Figuring out how to navigate that. Counties are responsible for the burial of the indigent population, and that becomes very, very complicated at times when you're trying to find someone to be able to just allow for someone to be cremated. It's a very difficult circumstance, and our coroner, my coroner, I actually had a longtime coroner that was there for over 28 years, and just have a new coroner now, and it is the same situation that the former coroner left, the new coroner has inherited, and maybe even a bit worse because of what we're seeing from the fentanyl overdose situation.
We have a new coroner in Scott County, Mark Sutton, and just recently, I believe it was last fiscal year, we spent tens of thousands of dollars to upgrade our facilities in order to be able to handle additional people that have passed away. That is an issue that we all struggle with. Every county does. Also, as he mentioned, the burial for folks that cannot afford it. That cost continues to go up, and our counties do handle those as well. That's something that I don't know that we've ever thought about including in a presentation anywhere, because everyone deserves a respectful burial, no matter in whether the family comes forward or how much money they have or anything like that. But that is another piece of the puzzle that county government handles. So it is something that we struggle with every year, because our coroner comes forward and says, I need this. And, then you also have your county clerk, your county sheriff, your road department. You have all these other elected officials that are needing things as well. So we have to figure out how to fit it into the puzzle, because it's very important to be respectful to those folks that have passed away.
Representative Brown has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Judge-elect Mosley. You spoke about recidivism as being a problem in our society, in the counties and all over the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And you talked about opioid settlement funds and spending those. Can you speak more about how we are looking to address the recidivism problem in our state and how opioid settlement funds can impact that?
It's a very great question, and certainly something that we've been focused on at KCO and throughout our counties. Judge Taylor from Madison County, Judge Moore from Boone County, myself, and Lauren Carr from Western Kentucky with the health department out there recently participated in the NACO Opioid Solutions Leadership Network. And we visited a couple of different places, Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, and up in the Milwaukee area of Wisconsin, to learn more about how they're addressing recidivism rates. An interesting perspective in North Carolina, they have went to a really hardcore medically assisted treatment in the jail setting, and that has reduced their recidivism by 40%, which is a huge statistic. I think that's an area that in Kentucky we can certainly look at more. The other expanding programming is certainly an area that we're looking at. As I mentioned, our Casey's Law Advocate is looking at the jail population roster each day to figure out who may be a better candidate for treatment. And we firmly believe that treatment is the way to get these folks back into a point to where they are a productive member of society.
Mr. Chair, just if there's an opportunity for legislation to come forward in the next session and sessions beyond that, I would be very happy to work with you and any other members of the General Assembly in crafting and or supporting that legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Senator Chambers Armstrong has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. Excuse me. My question is sort of similar to Representative Brown's, and I think Judge Mosley was beginning to get at it. I was very struck by sort of the conversation about jails being the primary provider of substance use disorder treatment, about the focus on rehabilitation, reducing recidivism. I'm curious, what programs are you all currently investing in that you want to continue? Or if you had more money, what programs would you add? I think what I heard you saying is a lot of it is focused on providing treatment for folks who are incarcerated. Are there other things? Are there other educational programs? What sort of if you had all the money in the world, what would you like to be doing?
Well, some of our, Jim likes to say when you see one county, you see one county. Some counties are doing additional programming more than others because some jails do not have the space to be able to have that type of additional programming related to the substance abuse problem. In my jail, we have a substance abuse SAT program that we have a coordinator that works specifically with inmates while they're incarcerated. That is certainly something we would like to expand on. We are also looking at a possibility of working with. We already do some GED training while they're in jail to have them walk out with some type of either a GED to be able to help them be able to get a job once they walk out. But also we're wanting to expand that to look at the opportunity to work with our community and technical college to try to do some more higher level education in the jail setting, and that's something that we're considering as we move forward. Obviously, with the amount of financial loss that we're currently experiencing, that has been actually complicated since COVID. We lost half of our state inmate population during the pandemic, and the court system has been slow to get folks back through, and that's resulted in lost revenue from the state, which helps us obviously balance our budget in that area. So a lot of need there, but we think giving people hope for a job once they walk out on the street to where they actually have an income will be the primary way to reduce recidivism as we move forward.
May I also include what he just said is when you see one county, you see one county. In Scott County, we have an 84, 85 bed facility, and we typically run in the low 100s in population in our jail. Our problem in Scott County is we cannot offer those programs because we don't have the space available. So we're in a situation there's been discussion, do we build a $40 million jail? But is it the best use of taxpayer dollars at this point? So we have held off the last 3 or 4 years, waiting to see what legislation may pass in working with the legislators and with CAECO to determine the best path forward in how we handle our jail situation, because we do not have the availability to do those types of programs within our setting because of the size of our jail.
Well, thank you all for the work you do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more. Oh, I do have a question. I'm sorry. Representative Chester Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recovery centers are growing by the numbers throughout the state. Do you all collaborate in any kind of way with those?
Yes, we do.
And how many do you know that we might have throughout the state that maybe could be a partner?
Yeah, and in Eastern Kentucky, we're very blessed to have several partners with Addiction Recovery Care, Frontier Behavioral Health. There are several. Isaiah's House is one in Central Kentucky that we've sent people to treatment through. And they are great partners in this work. The Operation Unite, which is primarily stationed in the 5th Congressional District, but has the statewide call number, the 1-833-8KY-HELP. They man that center. So we work with them to place people in treatment, and then we've also incorporated a Rides for Recovery program. A lot of people don't even have a way to get to treatment. So to try to get them there when they're ready to go.
Okay.
We do the same in Scott County, not as extensive as they may do, but part of the situation on this also that needs to be addressed is the judicial system.
Okay.
And getting people moved through the system much quicker, because maybe they could, instead of sitting 60, 90 days in jail, maybe we could get them out into treatment. And we have partnered in Scott County with the Isaiah House to start some programs, but they don't work if you're in jail all the time.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I want to thank CAECO and thank KLC for your presentations. Looks like we've got a lot to do in the upcoming session. We're looking forward to it. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up, we have the discussion on the Louisville Metro Comprehensive Review Commission's findings. So if you'll, gentlemen and ladies, come up, introduce yourselves, and we'll get started.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this opportunity. Jason Nemus, represent the 33rd District, Jefferson, Oldham, and Shelby counties.
Yeah, Earl Jones. I am Deputy General Counsel at General Electric Appliances in Louisville, and served as co-chairman of the commission with Representative Needs.
And I'm Paul Coombs. I'm a Emeritus Professor of Economics at University of Louisville, and I put together a team of researchers to basically organize the data to give insight to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just by way of background, wanted to note that 20 years ago, Louisville, or Jefferson County, voted to merge its city government, and so Louisville Metro was created about 20 years ago. This commission was a look back to see what have we done well, what could we do better, and so it was actually Joni Jenkins' idea to put this commission together. We passed that in House Bill 314 last year. House Bill 314 did a few other things, but one of the things that it did was put this commission together. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 5 nonpartisan members. We'll go through a bunch of the recommendations that we've made. There are 20 of them. I don't think we'll hit all 20 of them. We'll take obviously any questions on all 20 of them if you prefer. But I've got 6 that I want to talk about after I turn it over to Earl. But I would note that it's really important. The one thing that we're unified on is it's very important that the city core of Louisville be strong. We have a lot of people who live in the East End, South End, Old Louisville, West End, but it's very important that we have a strong city. And many cities throughout the nation, including Louisville, of course, are in some ways on their knees because we have populations that are leaving the city core. We have businesses that are leaving, going to suburbs or going to other counties. And so it's really important that we look to see how we can strengthen Louisville, because obviously Louisville is strong because of our friends in the mountains and our friends in West Kentucky, but you guys are also strong because of us and because of Fayette, because of Northern Kentucky. We kind of weave together to make Kentucky strong. So we need a strong Louisville to make all of our jobs easier and to help families from New Madrid Bend to Black Mountain. I would also note that we have within Louisville we have some tensions. It's natural that you're going to have those tensions. 2/3 of our population live outside the Watterson, and there are people who live outside the Watterson. My district is entirely outside the Watterson. We pay the majority of the taxes, and we feel like we've not been getting a fair share on boards and things of that nature, which we'll go into a little bit more. But the core of the issue for me is that we need a very strong downtown core, but we also need voices from all over the county to be at the table where decisions are made. I don't know if you want me to go into the 6 I want to talk about, or you want to go ahead?
Nope, that's
okay.
fine.
Okay, so the 6 I want to talk about are number 4. I don't know if you should have the document in front of you. That is the Louisville Metro Comprehensive Review Commission finding and recommendations. I want to talk about number 4. Affordable housing is a problem in your district. It's a problem certainly in my district. It's a problem all across Louisville, all across Kentucky. In Louisville, we have a need for 30,000 additional affordable housing units, and so we want to figure out. And I know Chairman Bridges, you've done a lot on affordable housing question, and we're looking to see what we can do more of.
Oh, okay.
We certainly need more apartment type units. But one of the things the commission wants to aim toward, and Senator Nemus was a leader in this, is to make sure that we're getting affordable housing for purchasing, for the first-time home buyer, for the person who's going to make $40,000 to $70,000 their life, and they should be able to have a little bit of wealth. And we know the way to accumulate wealth in our state and in our country is to get some ownership, and that is not only good for wealth and wealth transfer. It's also really good, as you know, Representative Thomas, when you plant your flag somewhere, you say, "This is mine." It makes you care more about the traffic and about the policing and about the local schools and so forth. So we want to incentivize to the best we can, not only the affordable units for renters, to be sure we want that, but we also want to see if we can find ways to increase ownership for lower middle class families and individuals. I also want to talk about number 6, if I might. That's probably the most controversial one that we have. I'll do just quick background on this and take some questions. Louisville EMS, just like Oldham County EMS, and I'm sure Fayette EMS and probably Rockcastle EMS, is countywide. And Louisville EMS was supposed to be countywide. It's been countywide for a long time, but it doesn't provide services across the county. So because it didn't provide adequate services throughout the county, our Chapter 75 fire protection districts, which many of you guys have in your areas, started adding on EMS services. And so we pay Louisville EMS, we pay 70% of the taxes in Louisville, and then which we don't get any of the EMS services or very few of those services. We also pay an extra cost, in addition, just the people who live in the Chapter 75 districts to protect our own lives for EMS services. And then to make things worse, many of our areas, St. Matthews, for example, 60% of their EMS runs go outside the district from where their taxpayers come from. So we have a problem in Jefferson County on fairness, to be sure. We have a problem on EMS, emergency medical services across our county. So what we've suggested is there's an old urban services district. That's the old city of Louisville. And they have three things that those taxpayers pay for that we don't pay for in the rest of the county, and that is lighting, garbage, and fire protection. Our recommendation is to make EMS a fourth USD only service, which means that they will be providing services within USD, which we're already doing largely, and the USD taxpayers will be responsible for that. To make it to where they can get on their feet, we've recommended that until 2030, 10% of that cost be fronted by the general fund. So my taxpayers will be paying for those services, even though they wouldn't legally be required to them. They wouldn't be getting them. Of course, they're not getting them now anyway. That is the most controversial thing. We're working with the mayor to determine if he has other options that we can go forward. He's worried that that's going to cost Louisville Metro too much money. Of course, from my perspective, we're paying for services that we're not getting. The people who getting those services, they need to be paying for them. That's number 6. If I could turn to number 10, and that is, like I said, that was the most controversial. I think the vote may have been like 9-5 or something like that. It was a close vote on our commission. Number 10, the boards and commissions. The reason we did this one is because, as I said, I want to make sure that all of the people all around Louisville are at the table where decisions are made. 2/3 of our population live outside the Waterston, as I've already said. But when boards are put together, my people are not put on them. And that, to me, is a problem. For example, I'll use the MSD. MSD is an very important board. There are 8 members of MSD. They're supposed to be appointed. We have 10 Senate districts in Jefferson County. They're supposed to be appointed 1 per Senate district, 8 of them. So 2 of them won't have one. But there cannot be 2 in 1 Senate district. The former mayor has violated that. He didn't give the geographic diversity that the statute requires. The statute also requires that no more than 5 of one political party be on the board. So you would assume in a place like Louisville, there'd be 5 Democrats. I don't have any beef with that. It's a Democrat town. There are 5 Democrats on the board. The other 3 are independents, 2 of whom were Democrats until the month or 2 before they were appointed. And the other independent, has been an independent for 20 years. But he's the Deputy Secretary of Justice for Governor Beshear. So there are 8 Democrats effectively on that board. They're wink, wink, nod, nod, complying with the rule, but they're not appointing people that are all across the county. And so what we've decided to do here is we said when the mayor or the council appoints a board, he has to look to diversity. He has to look for diversity of racial components. He has to look for diversity of gender, but he also has to look at geographic and political diversity as well. And that is number 10. The mayor, I don't think, has a problem with that. He has, I want to say, this mayor has taken large steps toward having that kind of diversity, and he understands that he represents Middletown and Okolona and not just inside the Waterston, as our former mayor unfortunately didn't understand. So this mayor is taking great steps toward that, and I want to commend him on that. I want to go to number 12. Number 12 had a lot of discussion. As we went all around the community, it's about zoning. And there are areas in Jefferson County, as there are areas all over the Commonwealth, that think that it's too easy, and there are some people that think that it's too difficult to have to have new development. So what we've thought about doing, Julie Rocky Adams is fronting this. She's looking at the bill now. What we were proposing is to make it very quick and automatic if the developer meets predetermined qualifications or requirements. But if they don't, then you get more of the local flavor, more locals making the decisions. For example, out in Eastwood, there are significant environmental concerns that haven't been understood and really, frankly, cared about by Metro Council because it's out in the hinterland in Jefferson County where there's not many population. But they believe that, and they're right, that Floyd's Fort ought to be respected when we're looking at development. And so we're looking at having more local decision making as part of the zoning. Actually, that was another number. I'll get back to that. Number 12 is actually go nonpartisan. I'm sorry. That what I was talking about there, I'll come back to when I get to that number. But number 12 is to look at nonpartisan. In Kentucky, we have 400 and something cities. There are only 6, I think, that are partisan. Jefferson County, Louisville is obviously partisan. Lexington obviously is not partisan. I think the next biggest city that's partisan is Shavli. And so, and you look around the country, the majority, not a great majority, but the majority of big cities are nonpartisan as well. And so we have recommended that we go nonpartisan. Frankly, I thought this would be very controversial. It was not. The vote was 11-2, and both of the council persons appointed by the Democrat voted for it. Earl and I both voted for it. We voted together on most things, not everything, but we certainly think that it would benefit our community to go toward a nonpartisan elections of our mayor and our council. So I apologize for thinking I was on a different one. I'll get back to that one in a second. I want to go, if I could, to number 13. It's kind of similar to number 12 in that we would look at, right now we have 26 council persons. Is that the right amount of numbers? Should we have some at-large members? That's something that Co-Chair Jones has recommended, so that we're going to look further into that and determine whether the current makeup is what it ought to be. As I said, whether we need at-large members. And is 26 too many? Does that mean that we have too much parochial interest and they're not looking out for a broader area? And so that's the kinds of things that Earl and I have been discussing, and our commission has recommended that we continue to look toward to improve the way Louisville is governed. Number 16 is the PVA question. This was somewhat controversial. The thought there is we had a member who had a hunch that your house was assessed at a higher value if you lived outside the Waterson than it was if you lived inside the Waterson. So I had the Greater Louisville Association of Realtors kick the tires and do an anecdotal survey. There are 9 housing districts in Louisville. 1, 2, and 3 are inside the Waterson. 4 through 9 are outside the Waterson, going southwest to northeast. And what we found is that, and this is anecdotal numbers, which is why we're asking for a study to make them not anecdotal, to make it holistic. Is what we found is up to 20% difference based on where your house is located. So what that means is, if you have a $200,000 house, Representative Dixon, shouldn't matter where that house is, that house should be assessed close to $200,000. What we found is that it's 20% less if it's inside the Waterson. That hurts our tax base, that hurts our school district, and it's also mighty unfair for the people I represent. So obviously I'm not going to sit still for that. So that's the question of what we're doing there, is looking at, have a study for that. If it comes back that everything is copacetic, or everything is as it ought to be, then as I've told our PVA, I'm going to go to the city hall, raise her hand, and play the Rocky music. But if it's not what it ought to be, we're not going to blame anybody. We're going to get it right and figure out how we can make that better. So I think that's the ones that I wanted to discuss, and then I'll turn it over to Earl and we can answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I'm glad to be here today. It was my honor to serve with Jason on this commission. I wanted to start with just a little look back at, I guess, the way I may have perceived what this commission would be like. And I think you all may recollect that coming out of the legislature, I think that the people in Jefferson County anticipated that this commission was probably going to be a hit job. Maybe there was some concern that the way the commission was being constituted would guarantee certain outcomes, which would not be, let's say, favorable to large segments of the community. There were probably some legitimate reasons to think that that was going to be the case, based upon the news coverage of the legislation as it was coming, as it was being enacted. The discussions among the commissioners also showed that there was some suspicion as we entered into these discussions. The thing I'd like you all to understand, though, is that as a result of those meetings, and as a result of the input that we received from residents of Jefferson County as we held public hearings throughout the county, is that there was some very significant concern raised by all residents in all quarters of the county. It's probably not a surprise to many of you as elected representatives that given the opportunity to talk with their government, most people will talk about what's not good. And that was our experience as well. So, but as we took those inputs and went back to our deliberations, the thing that I want to let you know is that most of the recommendations that you have in front of you, the 20, Most were enacted or approved by over 80% of the commissioners. Many of them were approved unanimously. So at the end of the day, the result of this commission was very significant agreement on some of the issues that we were confronted with and what we thought might be suggestions back to the legislature as to improvements that might be made. Now, I will say one thing, that the process, however, of coming up with the issues that were to be reviewed may not have been as comprehensive as it might otherwise have been. And some of that is owed to the fact that the way we began this process, we were a little late getting on board. We lacked some support in terms of the previous administration, by the way. We didn't get started until several months later because we didn't have the funding, or we didn't have our consultant in place. Once we got moving, of course, then we had some time constraints in getting our report pulled together. And notwithstanding that, though, I do think that the work product that we came up with was one that we want to recommend. But I do want to put some of them in context. And I particularly want to address the one that my colleague has focused on regarding EMS services. That was the most controversial. As I said before, these recommendations were approved overwhelmingly. This was the one that was not. Of those members voting, it was approved by 63%, and of those members present, by 53%. So it was clearly the most controversial. And so I'd urge you, as you consider the implications of this particular recommendation, that you approach it with some caution. And I say that because for one thing, we lacked certain data. The nature of this particular concern, where was EMS services being rendered by which particular organizations, the old UST group versus those of the fire districts, et cetera. We had the data on that, but what we didn't understand was, for example, of particular significance, at least to me, was how much of the runs that the USD service rendered inside the USD were for residents outside the USD. We know that that most of the residents who are outside the USD work inside the USD. So that's a statistic, I think, that bared some additional examination as to exactly what was going on there. We did not have the time to do that. So I think that's an important point to keep in mind as you look at that particular recommendation. I'd also like to point out that the implications of the recommendation would fall most heavily on some of the poorest, least resourced, and most, let's say, at-risk property owners in the USD, because the implications here would be that those residents would have to increase their property tax burden in order to sustain that level of service that they enjoy today. So those are just a couple of factoids, if you will, that I think bared some additional examination, which we unfortunately didn't have the ability to do. And so if you want to pursue that, I would hope that you would take a deeper dive into that particular question. Aside from that, I think that the recommendations of the Commission, particularly those in which we were all on board on things like the need for reform, a constitutional amendment on the question of giving cities the ability to diversify their tax base, is a very significant one. We were very united in our interest and concern and focus on economic development inside Jefferson County and the need for diversity of incentives that the legislature might provide for new technologies. We have a great focus in this Commonwealth on manufacturing. It's one of our critical strengths. It's the foundation, basically, of our economic development, and it's being strengthened, as you all know. We need, however, to open up the possibility for some of the new tech that are non-manufacturing kind of industries to come into the Commonwealth and grow that sector. We also want to Jason's point about housing, very important. Of across the Commonwealth. If we want to have a vibrant workforce and to recruit people to come into Kentucky, we need to make sure there's adequate affordable housing. And one thing we were interested in, particularly at least in Louisville, was the potential, how do we encourage the conversion of unused office space, as we've now seen the changes that have occurred in our downtowns. How do we encourage the use of some of that to be converted into living space? That's something that we think could be incentivized by the legislature as well. I think those are some of the highlights that I wanted to point out to you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to your response and actions that the General Assembly may take in response. Thank you.
We also have Paul Coombs here with us, who's our statistician. I know a lot of you know him, and so if you have questions for him as well.
Okay, we do have some questions. First up is Senator Nemes, which you may be acquainted with.
Do we have to yield to the question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I'd like to thank both the chairman of the committee, because it was very in detail, and also Mr. Coombs, who did a great job and a rush job to get the information that we asked for. Earl, I have to say that the EMS was the most contentious thing. And, you know, there was things like, well, they're supposed to go outside the urban service district, but then if the recommendation that they stay within the urban service district, can the poor within there afford that? Besides that, I think we have all really good recommendations. But what I wanted to say is, Representative Nemes reminds me of when you were younger and a teacher would call, and I'd ask why the teacher called, and you would talk very quickly. So,
and I tell on myself.
So
I learned not to tell on myself anymore.
So anyway, I think that we need to explain a little bit what urban service district is and what inside outside of Waterson is. We know that because we're from the area. So I'll quickly explain that, and then you can expand on that. The urban service district is basically the old city of Louisville, which is inside the Waterson Expressway, and outside the Waterson Expressway is outside of the old city. So that maybe helps you put it in context of what we're talking about, the differences in services. And when the merger started, the urban service districts, the city of Louisville, had services that the rest of the county, unincorporated, and the small cities outside in the county did not have. So there was a deal made that they would pay a little bit more on the rate of the taxes to receive those three services that Representative Nemes said. In so doing, then, one of the countywide services is in the police force in the EMS, which then Representative Nemes was talking about how they think that is not being done properly, and what is one of the recommendations. If you want to expand on the urban service district inside of Waterson.
I think generally you've got it. Yeah, it's old Louisville. It's the old city lines of Louisville. And when we merged, there were some things that were supposed to merge, or some things we agreed wouldn't merge.
We have a couple more questions, but I've got a question. We were talking about the EMS being so controversial and everything. There's some other items in here that you have addressed, the diversity of the members, getting back to what the intent of statute was as far as what members, and getting that balanced out. Right. Do you feel like some of these other suggestions may help correct like the parts of the EMS system where that everyone has an interest to represent each area to bring more equity to all areas?
There wouldn't be, I don't think, an EMS board. So I don't know that problem would be resolved by just having the board question resolved. I think the board question will help a lot. For example, there's also MSD goes into Odom and Bullitt County, and they don't have a position on the board, and they ought to. But that, I don't think it resolves the EMS. The EMS question is a big question. It's not one I'm willing to go away from. I'm going to be pressing it. But I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm talking with the mayor about it. We've been texting him about it. They're trying to come up with their plan, their proposal, and we want to. Julie Rocky Adams and I have been very open to listening to what he has to say. We want to make sure that we don't harm our areas. I would say that some of the wealthiest areas are also in the USD. It's not just poor areas. It's some of the wealthiest areas in Louisville as well. And they're not paying their fair share. If you look at the PVA question, we'll determine whether I'm right or wrong on that. but they're getting a service that we're paying for. We're paying 70% of the EMS service cost, and we're not getting the runs. That isn't right. There's a tension there, yes, no doubt about that. But half of the people who live in USD work outside the USD. Only a third of the people who live outside the USD work in the USD. They're getting subsidized to a large extent, and I don't think it's fair. And we didn't talk about a lot of the things. We didn't talk about making changes to policing. And in the general terms, we have one officer for every 200 people in the West End, one officer every 2,200 people in my district. Now, I'm not saying it should be even, not saying that, but I'm saying there are differences in the taxpayer base and where the services are. You look at TARC. TARC is barely in my district, yet we pay 70% of TARC. And that's those things aren't fair, but we didn't make those recommendations. Another recommendation that we didn't make, one that I strongly support, but I wanted to be I want to have a right hand of friendship to our new mayor, is to disallow stacking in Oldham County and Shelby County. If for example, Simpsonville has a 1% occupational tax and Shelby County has a 1% occupational tax, that goes to Simpsonville, not Shelby County. Louisville is a county for that purpose, and we stack them. So J-Town has an occupational tax, and that stacks on top of Louisville metros, and that doesn't seem right to me. I think it should be in Louisville. Why should Jefferson County be treated? Our businesses be treated more harshly than everywhere else. So I'm not for stacking, but in Jefferson County we allow that. I pulled back from that out of respect to for our new mayor. I don't know if I'll pull back from that forever, but we did for this session.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to just comment on this if I could, and I think it's very important that these issues be approached from some sense of what is the best solution for the entire community. I was really concerned about I guess what I would sort of refer to maybe as a kind of a grievance approach to some of these issues. And I respect Jason. I know he feels very deeply about these issues. Much of this is historical, and I think we just all have to acknowledge that. I don't think Jason would disagree with that. And the question is history always where we go, or can we look back at it and say, we learned from that, and then let's now work in a different way? I believe that the current mayor has an understanding of that, and it's clear that these issues having been raised, that if they're not addressed, some very not good things are going to happen. And so it's in the interest of the elected officials in Jefferson County to pay attention to these questions in a way that maybe some may have taken for granted in the past. Jason's indicated that he understands that the mayor is looking at things differently now, and I think that I would urge you all to support that effort and to sort of give this thing some time to work itself through. A solution that will be created inside the community will have much greater support and be received obviously much better from the citizens than one that will be imposed on them from, admittedly, inside the state, but nonetheless not inside that direct community. So I appreciate these points, but and one of the reasons why, just take a point of personal interest here, I was interested in the idea of changing the composition of the Metro Council. Is people are focused on the people they represent, and sometimes the interest or the demands of those constituents can blind them to the needs of the greater community in which their own citizens have to interact with. And so the idea of at-large representation or some kind of restructuring of the council to make sure that things sort of knit together let's call it the old city and the old county areas is, I think, something that really is important. That needs to be given some time to grow it and to get some traction inside the county. And I'd urge you all again to give that some time to work its way, because I do think that over time we'll all recognize, back to the point that Jason's made, that our collective success is critical only and can only be achieved if we're all working together.
Thank you. And I do understand that. I know as representatives, our districts encompass about 45,000 people, but at the end of the day, each one of us represent 4.5 million people, and you have to look at the goodness of the whole as much as you do your little nest. So I appreciate the point you made. We have more questions. Senator Chambers Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here today. Some folks on the committee might not know that before I was in this seat, I served on the Louisville Metro Council, and so got to see from the other side the beginnings of this process, and really appreciate hearing it sounds like there's been a very collaborative spirit, a very bipartisan spirit, and that conversations are ongoing. Very intrigued by the idea of at-large members of Metro Council. I think that's a very interesting idea, and I'm very curious to learn more about it as this process continues. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I think the 26 members of Metro Council overwhelmingly are doing an incredible job. They have a lot of work. They represent, some folks might be like, 26, that's a lot of people. I believe they represent around 20,000 people each. Is that right? 23,000 after redistricting. So they do represent a lot of people and have a lot of demands on their time. They're in session, to use the lingo from up here, year round, and are largely liaisons for, strong neighborhoods to our city government. And so I just want to say that there are a lot of them, but they are working very hard on a lot of really important issues. My question, I just wanted to better understand the process a little bit about how we arrived at these recommendations. I appreciate Representative Nemes, you being very candid about sort of where the points of disagreement were, and that allowed me to kind of understand what this process was like. But it sounds like you all took a vote on every recommendation. Many of those were unanimous. I'm not surprised, there's some really good stuff in here. Some of those were more contentious. But I just want to be clear, we're not to understand this as like a consensus document. This is something where each recommendation was voted. Is there a vote on the final report?
We voted on each of them individually. We didn't vote on the final report.
Okay, thank you.
And there were two of them that I would say two of them were controversial. One of them was the EMS and the other one was the PVA question. The rest of them overwhelmingly passed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, can I have one quick follow-up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was curious about the EMS one, and I think what I understood some of the controversy to be is this idea that we have a lot of folks, 70,000 people a day coming from the suburbs to work downtown, I think is the number. At least it was when I was on Metro Council. Is that roughly?
About right.
About right. Thank you. And so part of the concern is how do we make sure that we're providing services for the influx of folks into our downtown every day, and thinking about that almost like the way we would think about investments in like our library or zoo, where it's a sort of service for our service for our entire county, and the fact that we have a lot of people that utilize it who might not necessarily live there.
Right. And there are 42,000 USD that go outside USD. So it's only a net of about 28,000.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some missing data there. My question is, and I think I have a little bit more to learn about this, but it sounds like from what you're saying, the proposal right now would increase the tax burden on those living in the USD, Urban Services District, but it wouldn't necessarily lower it on folks in suburban cities. Is that right?
No, it wouldn't lower it.
It would not lower it.
No, it would not. No,
it would just increase on the city of Louisville, but it would not lower
we're all the city of
anywhere else.
Louisville, the old USD.
Yeah.
The reason it wouldn't lower it is because we would still be paying into the general fund. So actually it would open up, I don't know how many millions of dollars, but it would open up some funds in the general fund that were going to Louisville EMS that would not be going to Louisville EMS. But the suburban taxpayer would not be getting a tax reduction.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the ongoing conversations, particularly how you account for some of the movement of people across the county, and when you think about services and investment and all of that. But I appreciate your all's work, and I appreciate the information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator.
Yes, just one final comment, Senator, on that question about who's being served here. In addition to those who work in the USD, don't forget that the downtown is, if you will, the festival center of the county. And so Waterfront Park, the Yum Center, these are all places of large gatherings of people, all of whom are citizens of Jefferson County and, in fact, other counties in the Commonwealth and, of course, across the river as well. So it's a little not accurate, I guess I would say, and maybe even misleading to suggest that runs inside the old city are therefore only for residents of the old city, to the exclusion of those who are outside of the old city.
Okay, Senator Mays Bledsoe has a question.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have commentary and two quick questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
The quick commentary is this. I really applaud your work. Lexington obviously merged much earlier than you all. I served on that merged government for 8 years. There are 15 of us, 12 at the district, 3 at large. I highly recommend the model. Just because it's interesting. I think to your point, it's valid. Although Lexington district members represent about 27,000 people per district, which is substantially more. We make substantially less than Louisville. And I know that because we benchmarked a lot of our work against Louisville. What are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? What are you doing better? What can we learn from each other? So I applaud a lot of your issues here are things that we've talked about ourselves, especially on charter review. So one thing I wanted to ask is how much of this, if it's passed, goes back to referendum locally, or is none of it all of it KRS mandated?
It's all KRS.
So you have no local.
No, there's not. One problem is there's a recent Court of Appeals opinion that questions whether Lexington or Louisville can even exist.
Yeah.
The Court of Appeals opinion based on a bill that we passed last session about that has to do with JCPS and it's going to the Supreme Court. But what it says is if there's a statute that applies to one place, Chapter 67C only applies to Louisville.
That's right.
Chapter 67B only applies to Fayette. So there's a real question as to whether merger is even legal in the first place if you look at that Court of Appeals opinion. I pray that the Supreme Court reverses that, or we've got a big problem, and so do you in Fayette County. But no, the city of Louisville is created by statute, and 67C and these changes would be recommendations for changes to 67C.
That's interesting because in Lexington we're a little different. There are some charter review things we would like to do that do require a referendum. I think we merged a lot earlier. These are one of the byproducts that there are some things we can do by KRS and some would have to be literally on a ballot for public referendum. And it is challenging to navigate both of those things. So I want to say how much I appreciate what you've done because I think those are things that we've been looking at as well and would be interested in kind of partnering. And I'm following that court case substantially because I think it could have a really big impact on how we think about our communities.
I don't think the people of Louisville understand how dangerous that opinion is.
I agree. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. One final question, Senator Thayer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good presentation today, gentlemen. Dr. Coombs, it's always good to see you. Whenever you're at the table, it brings an added level of credibility. We've known each other from a long time from my private sector work, and it's good to see you here. Representative Nemes, it's good to see you bring up the topic of partisan races and nonpartisan races, and I don't really have a question other than to say I don't know if I'm going to bring the bill back or not this year. Representative Lockett and I are still in discussions because we had companion bills last year that would make city council races and school board races partisan, and I know this puts people in a bad spot. I hear from Republicans in suburban areas and Democrats in rural areas who say it would just be an absolute calamity if we did this, but I just want to ask a rhetorical question. Why is there opposition to giving voters more information about the people they're voting for when they go in the polling booths? Maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but it just seems to me that these nonpartisan races, and I live in a town where I've seen it come to fruition in Georgetown, they just become beauty pageants. People who have a family name or they've lived around forever end up on the city council or the school board, and in many cases where I live, not making good decisions. Maybe you've got the same. Maybe you like what you've got, but I don't. And so when I don't like what I have, I generally get in a mood to change it. So be ready. I might be coming back. We'll see what Representative Lockett wants to do.
I take that as rhetorical.
That's correct. And that brings about the next final question from Representative Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is more of a rhetorical statement, I guess. Since I was mentioned in the previous comments, I get time on the floor. I think that's how that works,
that's
correct?
Right.
So
that's right.
I just wanted to say that I would say there's a really, really good chance that bill is coming back. And I would kind of go back and defer as well to the statement that was made before. That's a very rhetorical question, and since our friends from KLC are still here as well,
What would be the opposition to that bill?
Yeah, I think you talk to Secretary Gray, right? Secretary Gray will tell you, as he's told me, one of the best things about the Lexington model is that it's nonpartisan. And so when he comes to Frankfort and he deals with supermajority Republicans, we're not dealing with him as a Democrat. We're dealing with as a mayor of Lexington. I would also say, if you're talking about within Louisville, let me talk about what I know most about. Now, our current mayor doesn't behave in this way, and I want to commend him for that, and I hope it continues. But in Louisville, you don't have to care about Eastwood. You don't even have to know where Eastwood is. You don't have to care about Valley Station. They vote Republican. You don't have to. You don't need to ever have been to Okolona or Fern Creek. They vote Republican. All you have to do is win inside the Watterson where the Democrats live, and only win a primary. Nothing else matters. And so you don't have to care about the environmental concerns in Eastwood, the traffic concerns on Dixie Highway. You don't have to care about those kinds of things. But if you have to hunt votes all around the county, then you give a damn about all the voters all around the county. And I would suggest that that's the major difference. So that's why I think it's the right thing to do to make it nonpartisan. But whether you and I agree on that question or not, I think it ought not be only my town that effectively, there are 5 others that are small. It ought not be only my town that is partisan and everywhere else is nonpartisan. If we're going to make my town partisan, so should yours and everybody else's. And so I think the better way forward is to make them all nonpartisan.
With that, I think that's going to finalize the last meeting of the joint local government interim committee. We appreciate all those that are testified. I also want to extend my appreciation and Senator Mills' appreciation to all the members of this force or this committee, and we appreciate all your involvement in it. So with that, a motion for adjournment. Thank you. Second. We stand adjourned.